Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting perfectly still. They're not working. They're not exercising. They're not learning a new skill. They're just staring out a window. Most people would call that wasted time. But for almost all of human history, that person would have looked completely normal. In fact, scientists are beginning to suspect that one of the strangest things about modern humans isn't how much we work. It's that we almost never stop. And that may be a bigger problem than anyone realizes. Today, boredom has a reputation problem. We treat it like a bug in the human operating system. A feeling to eliminate. A gap to fill. A problem to solve. The moment boredom appears, we reach for something. A phone. A conversation. A snack. A podcast. A screen. Anything. But for more than 300,000 years, boredom wasn't an accident. It was a normal part of being alive. And the strange thing is that your ancestors were probably far less busy than you imagine. When most people picture prehistoric humans, they imagine constant struggle. A never-ending survival marathon. Running after animals. Escaping predators. Searching desperately for food. Every hour packed with urgent activity. It seems obvious. Life was harder. So people must have been busier. But when anthropologists began studying some of the last remaining hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, they found something unexpected. The Hadza of Tanzania. The San of the Kalahari Desert. The Ache of Paraguay. Again and again, researchers reported the same surprising pattern. People spent far less time working than modern humans do. In many groups, adults spent only 3 to 5 hours each day gathering food. The rest of the day was something else. Talking. Resting. Repairing tools. Watching children. Telling stories. Sitting quietly. Thinking. Sometimes doing absolutely nothing at all. To a modern office worker, it would look unproductive. To your ancestors, it was life. And this creates a strange question. If survival was so difficult, why weren't humans busy all the time? The answer begins with a misunderstanding. For most of human history, energy was more valuable than time. Today, time feels scarce. You rush through breakfast. You answer emails while eating lunch. You listen to podcasts while exercising. Every empty moment feels like something that should be optimized. But your ancestors lived in a completely different reality. Calories were hard to get. Energy was precious. Wasting energy could kill you. Imagine a hunter returning from a successful hunt. The animal has been killed. The food has been shared. The immediate crisis is over. What happens next? A modern mind expects another task. Another objective. Another goal. But there often wasn't one. The smartest thing to do was nothing. Rest conserved calories. Movement burned them. For hundreds of thousands of years, idleness wasn't laziness. It was efficiency. A lion spends most of its life resting. Not because it is lazy. Because movement costs energy. Humans evolved under the same logic. And that logic shaped your brain in ways most people never think about. But something even stranger was happening during those quiet hours. The human brain wasn't shutting down. It was doing some of its most important work. Modern neuroscience has discovered a network inside the brain known as the default mode network. The name sounds technical. But the idea is surprisingly simple. When you stop focusing on a task, certain regions of your brain become more active, not less. The brain begins wandering. Replaying memories. Imagining future events. Simulating conversations. Solving problems. Building stories. Making connections. For decades, scientists assumed this activity was meaningless noise. Mental clutter. Static. But researchers now believe it may be one of the most important functions the brain performs. Some neuroscientists have described it as the brain's internal workshop. The place where experience becomes understanding. And for most of human history, humans spent enormous amounts of time inside that workshop. Long walks. Long evenings. Long stretches around campfires. Periods of waiting. Periods of observation. Periods with nothing demanding immediate attention. From a modern perspective, this looks like boredom. From an evolutionary perspective, it may have been cognitive training. Because the ability to imagine things that aren't happening right now is one of the defining features of our species. A deer reacts to the world it sees. A human can react to a world that exists only in imagination. That ability changes everything. You can plan. You can predict. You can tell stories. You can invent tools. You can imagine tomorrow. And many of those abilities seem to flourish during moments when nothing appears to be happening. Which raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if boredom isn't the absence of activity? What if it's the environment where some of the most important mental activity occurs? For most of human history, this wasn't a problem. The world itself enforced boredom. You couldn't check your phone. You couldn't open another tab. You couldn't scroll endlessly through information from people thousands of miles away. If nothing was happening around you, then nothing was happening. And your mind was left alone with itself. But eventually, that began to change. The first major shift happened around 12,000 years ago. Agriculture. Before farming, most humans lived as hunter-gatherers. Food came from the landscape. The rhythms of life were determined by seasons, weather, and migration. Then humans began planting crops. And for the first time, nature started operating on a schedule humans could influence. Fields needed tending. Seeds needed planting. Harvests needed timing. Suddenly, there was always another task waiting. The work wasn't necessarily harder. But it was more constant. Anthropologists sometimes describe agriculture as one of the greatest trade-offs in human history. Food became more predictable. Settlements became larger. Civilizations emerged. But something else emerged too. Routine. For perhaps the first time, large numbers of humans began organizing life around repeated obligations. One task after another. One season after another. One responsibility after another. And the trend only accelerated. Cities grew. Governments expanded. Specialized jobs appeared. A person's role in society became increasingly defined by what they produced. But even then, something familiar remained. Periods of idleness still existed. A farmer might work intensely during harvest and spend long stretches waiting during winter. A sailor might endure weeks at sea staring at the horizon. A shepherd could spend entire afternoons watching animals graze. The human mind still had room to wander. Then came a transformation unlike anything our species had experienced before. The Industrial Revolution. And this is where the story changes. Before factories, most work was connected to natural cycles. After factories, work became connected to clocks. For thousands of years, humans followed sunlight. Now they followed schedules. The factory whistle replaced the sunrise. Minutes became measurable. Hours became commodities. Time itself became something people could buy and sell. Historians sometimes describe this period as the invention of modern time. Not because clocks were new, but because humans started treating every moment as a resource. Something valuable. Something that could be wasted. Something that should always be used. The language changed. Productive. Unproductive. Efficiency. Optimization. Time management. These ideas sound normal to us. But for almost all of human history, they would have sounded bizarre. Imagine explaining to a hunter-gatherer that sitting quietly under a tree was a waste of time. They might not even understand the sentence. Wasted compared to what? The tree is providing shade. The body is resting. The mind is thinking. Nothing is wrong. But modern society gradually taught people something different. If you are not doing something measurable, you are falling behind. And that belief became one of the most powerful forces in human history. Then came the final transformation. Electricity. Television. Computers. Smartphones. For the first time, boredom itself became optional. Or at least it seemed that way. Whenever boredom appeared, a solution was immediately available. A notification. A video. A message. A game. A feed that never ends. And this created a situation unlike anything our ancestors ever experienced. For hundreds of thousands of years, boredom arrived naturally and stayed until something in the environment changed. Now boredom arrives and disappears within seconds. Many people can eliminate it before they fully feel it. But researchers have begun noticing something strange. The easier boredom becomes to escape, the harder it becomes to tolerate. In one experiment, psychologists asked participants to sit alone in a room with nothing to do. No phones. No books. No conversation. Just their own thoughts. Many participants reported finding the experience unpleasant. Some found it extremely uncomfortable. And in perhaps the most famous result, a surprising number chose to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than sit quietly with their thoughts. Think about that. People preferred physical discomfort over mental stillness. Not because the room was dangerous. Not because anything bad was happening. Because nothing was happening. And that felt worse. Your ancestors would probably find this confusing. For them, periods of mental stillness weren't unusual. They were unavoidable. And perhaps necessary. Because boredom appears to serve a purpose. When external stimulation decreases, the brain often turns inward. It begins organizing information. Reviewing memories. Simulating possibilities. Generating ideas. Many of history's most important insights seem to emerge during moments of apparent inactivity. Long walks. Baths. Sleepless nights. Hours spent staring into fires. Hours spent staring into nothing. The moments that look empty from the outside are often crowded on the inside. And yet modern life increasingly treats those moments as problems. Every silence filled. Every pause interrupted. Every empty space occupied. For the first time in human history, many people spend nearly every waking moment consuming information created by someone else. And this raises a difficult question. If your ancestors spent thousands of hours alone with their thoughts, and you spend thousands of hours consuming other people's thoughts, what changes? Nobody knows the full answer yet. But some researchers suspect we are conducting one of the largest psychological experiments in human history. And every one of us is participating. Because boredom may not simply be an unpleasant feeling. It may be a signal. A doorway. A transition state between the outside world and the inside world. The feeling itself is uncomfortable because it pushes you somewhere. Toward reflection. Toward imagination. Toward curiosity. Toward the next idea. But if that doorway is closed every time it appears, something important may never happen. And this brings us back to the person staring out the window. Most people see someone doing nothing. But your ancestors might have seen something entirely different. A person planning tomorrow's hunt. A person replaying yesterday's mistakes. A person imagining stories. A person understanding their place in the world. For 300,000 years, humans lived in environments where boredom was unavoidable. Not because life was empty. Because life contained space. Space between tasks. Space between conversations. Space between moments of survival. And inside those spaces, the human mind evolved. We often imagine progress as the removal of inconvenience. The removal of effort. The removal of waiting. The removal of discomfort. But some inconveniences may have been doing important work. Some forms of waiting may have shaped who we are. Some forms of boredom may have helped create the very minds trying so hard to escape them. Today, if you feel bored, the solution is usually within arm's reach. A screen. A notification. A distraction. Something to fill the silence. And maybe that's useful. Maybe it's harmless. Or maybe future historians will look back at this period the way we look back at the disappearance of darkness after electric light. As the moment humans eliminated something ancient without fully understanding what it was for. For hundreds of thousands of years, your ancestors spent parts of every day doing what modern society often treats as a failure. Nothing. They sat. They watched. They waited. They thought. And somewhere inside those quiet hours, the human mind became what it is today. We inherited the result. But we rarely experience the process. And that may be one of the strangest things about being human in the modern world. Not that we're busy. But that we've forgotten how not to be.